Hello and welcome. This is the Zen community of Oregon, making the teachings of the Buddha Dharma accessible to support your practice. New episodes air every week.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Maybe some of you were so glad you could slip out from family gathering and you had a good excuse to get out. I don't know. I like these nights when it's more intimate. Different iteration, different feeling. For the benefit of this group, and also, I find out that the ZCO podcast has a pretty good reach. And I hear from people all the time that, I listened to such and such a talk. I thought I would address a little bit practicing with family. So many people are doing that, will be doing that. And I just got back from visiting my mother. My partner and I, we went and spent a few days. And this talk is partially drawn from that. My honest self-assessment is a C- in my practice. Though I started to find my groove a little bit more about how to show up before leaving. So it's my belief that family karma, I'll use this word karma, and let me define it, the conditioned patterning that self-replicates unless interrupted. And that's maybe a good definition of karma. Habit patterns that will self-replicate unless they're interrupted by wisdom, by practice of some sort. Family karma is the hardest to change because it's laid down so deep in the psyche, in the body, so early on. And in families, we seem to be so sure that we know who each other is. And so you have people who are sure of who the other is, even though 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years have passed. And they often have an image of a person who no longer exists. But the interesting thing is, the way people feel and see about you has an effect on how you show up. There's something about if you're viewed as that 10-year-old or that 20-year-old or whatever that did X, Y, Z, that actually has some sort of field effect on who you show up as. In the process work practice, they call it being dreamed up. Being dreamed up is when someone else's projections on you actually elicit a little bit of that flavor from you. An interesting thing. The old term for a renunciate in Buddhism is a home leaver. And in some ways, the intensity of like a traditional Indian life, right, where the roles that you play in a family and the firmness of those traditional family structures, maybe there's a lot of Western structures that were actually similar. That was such a force of conditioning to find freedom within that was considered basically impossible. Right? And so the home leaver, the person who left home, who renounced family life for spiritual practice was really celebrated, and that was looked at as vital. That's not what most of us want to do. That's not how we see liberation in a spiritual sense. We want to find more freedom with our families without having to really extricate ourselves from the system. This is all a preamble to say family karma is intense, right? And it always has been. So I believe it's the hardest to change and the last to change. And so I gave myself a C-, but I'm a Dharma teacher. Right? Like, I don't really have an excuse. I would like to get a B+ someday. We'll see. So before I went, I'm aware of how deep the grooves, how deeply set those kind of habit patterns are with family. So one of the things I did a few days before I'm going to visit my mom is I would envision her and I would do loving kindness practice. Now when you do loving kindness practice, let's say you're envisioning an in-law and you think, may you be at ease, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering. You're not sending magic beams across the country. That's not the main intent. It may be because mind has a non-local effect. Mind transcends the limitations of the body to some degree, especially if your practice is strong. That might actually have some kind of vibe. But the real purpose of a practice like that is to prime me so that when I show up, the last impression I have, the relationship I'm starting to establish in my own heart is one of friendliness towards this person. I'm trying to pick the stance that I would like to show up with. It's not about her feeling my lovingness like a Care Bear or something. Right? In a way, if you think of somebody that you have a lot of negative or neutral interactions with, that creates a kind of psychic residue. And you're more likely to have negative and neutral reactions to somebody that you've already had negative and neutral reactions to, because the mind is a karmic existence. So a practice like loving kindness, you're starting to kind of add something else into the mix. Think if you're mixing paint. You want to lighten the tone, you add a little bit of white paint. Okay, a little bit lighter. How much white paint do you want to add? So I found that to be it bore out as a useful thing. Right? Because I can go into different patterns of closure, of avoidance. I think my instinctual patterns I have laid down is to close myself to what is in the relationship channel with my mother and I. Right? Some kind of defensive posture. But instead, I laid down a little bit. And I've done this over the years of the groove of open-heartedness. So that's the first practice I want to recommend, is connect with how you want to show up. Now that is, when you do a practice like metta, loving kindness, you are potentiating, you are practicing a stance. It's an attitude of the heart. You're practicing that. You're priming is probably a good word for me. But you might also think about the patterns that you have and how you wish to show up in that space. So for example, for me, I believe that I see ways that my mother is an ally or is complicit in her own unhappiness. That's my belief. Right? And so what the part that comes out in me, or the pattern that tends to come out, is, well, I'm going to slide in a little advice. I'm going to really gently tell you that you shouldn't do that, don't eat that, why aren't you doing that? Right? In the span of 3 hours, I've given her a whole list of things she's doing wrong. But I really mean well. Right? Instead of doing that, I committed to a stance of non-judgment. I totally committed to a stance of no advice. I'm not going to give any advice. I'm not going to comment. I succeeded in this. This is why I get a C. This is a place I succeeded. I didn't criticize her for what she did. Now, my girlfriend was witnessing me, and sometimes she said, "Oh, you looked so sad sometimes." Because I was witnessing what I was witnessing, And instead of doing what I might normally do, which is, here's how I can help you fix that, I was just feeling the impact of it. But the sadness is a little bit, it's kind of honest. Right? My state, what arises for me when I witness what I witness was just real for me. So many people have different patterns that show up with family. A lot of them started a long, long time ago. Right? One pattern is like the pleaser. So you think, okay, what I can do is be who everybody wants me to be. I can say all the right things. I can be extremely pleasant. I can be the first one to say, yes, I'll do X, Y, Z. And, that may have been a survival strategy that might have gotten us what we wanted, that might have gotten us attention. It's not satisfying relationship, though. Usually when we're a pleaser in those situations, something in us feels resentful or distasteful about interacting. We don't feel like we're showing up in a whole way. Sometimes pleaser parts, they're similar to peacemaker parts of us, that we're so afraid of conflict that we do whatever we can to manage it in the family. And when you take on the role of managing conflict in the family, you know what being with family's like? It's really tense. You're on. You're like trying to control things that are not controllable. Human beings. That's one side of the spectrum. Another side is there are people who just rebel. You think, this time I'm just going to give people a piece of my mind. I'm just going to tell exactly what I think, and if someone says they want to go out for this, I'm going to say, nope, don't want to do that. I'm just going to dig my heels in. That's the other kind of strategy. It's like a teenage rebel that shows up. So what I'm suggesting is maybe think on the patterns that you know in yourself that happen when you get in these kind of situations with family, and think about not enacting them. The first thing is to agree, I'm going to try to put a pause on this. And our meditation serves us because we're training in non-impulsive presence. I believe it's the same skill that doesn't scratch an itch or doesn't follow a fantasy 100% in meditation, that just holds steady, that holds steady in the potential habit pattern unfolding. It's actually the same skill, just applied in a different place. One of the things I've been noticing in regards to habit patterns and showing up how I might want to show up is that I'm not really inspired when people tell me how not to be. If you're interested in some sort of positive change in yourself, it's not really all that, it's hard to get enthusiasm in saying, I'm going to stop being fill in the blank. I'm going to stop being a pleaser. Because already you have this idea of, I do this thing that's kind of bad. I do this thing that maybe I shouldn't do. And you might have a little bit of motivation to stop that, but again, you're focusing on the negative. Right? You're dwelling on a character shortcoming. I think, at least for me, I find there's more energy instead if I focus on how do I want to show up. So I'm aware that I might show up with my mom as an advice giver, a secret advice giver. I don't want to do that, okay? I'm not going to focus on stopping that. That's not going to be my mission. I think, for me, the best thing I can do is just amplify the humor in the situation. Right? So I kind of preload, I intend to show up and just be lighthearted. Right? Just make light of the human condition. That's a lot more effective for me. So if you think of you're going home or people are coming over, what would be an enjoyable way for you to be? Envision that, implant that, do that a lot. Do that many times. Do that before they ring the doorbell. Do that before the dinner lands. Think about how you want to be. Not really for them. It benefits them, primarily for your own sense of showing up in a way that's not automatic. It's sort of like the precepts. So the Bodhisattva precepts, I haven't taught on them since I've returned to Portland, but I will in 2025. The precepts are the injunctions for ethical living. Some of them are translated with the positive injunction first. Cherish life, do not kill. Be giving, do not steal. See the perfection, do not dwell on the faults of others. If you do the first one, in a way, you don't have to worry about the second one. If we show up with our family in a creative way, which means we have some space from our habit patterns, we have at least a little bit, we don't have to focus on the problematic, actually. We can just be generous. We can just be silly. We can just be helpful, right? If those are things outside of the patterns. I'm aware that I'm saying something that's easy to say and hard to do. And I don't intend it like that. I think that some of us have a pattern of withdrawing when we get triggered. That's something I don't recommend. But I also do recommend taking space. Right? And that's a kind of humility, to go for a walk, to do what it takes to, if you're losing a sense of spaciousness or a sense of open-heartedness, it's better to intentionally step away than it is to be there and get escalated. Right? Because speaking of karma, the karma of expressing our irritation is not very good. It doesn't have a good effect. Yeah? We get irritated, other people get irritated, they get afraid of our irritation. Is that right? So that's another suggestion is, okay, we each have our capacity to be with family freely. And if you're hitting that edge, better to back off a little bit and re-engage than just stay put for no reason. Right? Sometimes we don't have this option. Perfection is a weird idea. I've never met a perfect person. I've never even met someone who was close to perfect. And I've hung around people who've done lots of spiritual practice for a long time. All of them have foibles and flaws that aren't that hard to see across the board. Being perfect is never the point, from my perspective, and I think from the perspective of the tradition. But accepting responsibility is important. I've noticed in myself, when I get irritated or I'm reactive, if I can meaningfully own that, the sooner I can do that, the quicker things release for myself or others. Yeah. Get to practice this with my partner. Right? I notice if we have a little micro conflict, the sooner I can say, you're right, I'm sorry, I was rude. I was insensitive. The sooner I can say that and mean that, the whole pattern, the energy, not only in me, but in her, right? Not only in me, but in my mom, can release. That's the practice of humility, is I am somebody who says stupid things. I am rude sometimes. I am insensitive. Oftentimes, I don't even know I'm insensitive. I need someone else to point it out to me. Like, oh yeah, I did just completely take care of myself and ignore you. Wow, that was interesting. Apologize, take responsibility. That's a big part of our practice. I think that's what atonement means. If it's not like laden heavily with religious stuff, it means, oh yeah, I was human, I'm sorry. Right? And it doesn't have to be some like gigantic, contrition. So if you can do that in real time, I recommend it. Sidebar, the pleaser is always saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That's a little bit different. That's a special case. I'm not going to dwell on this point too much, but one of the things that surprises me about it is that people really appreciate it. People really appreciate even just small harms being acknowledged in the moment. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Because everybody wants to feel that they're respected and that someone has their well-being in regard. And when we say things or do things that are even harmful a little bit, it triggers that sense of, oh, maybe I'm not respected. Like maybe you don't realize that there's a feeling being here. And so the acknowledgement that that's a world of experience, I think goes a long way. In some sense, somebody who is not going from a part of themselves like a rebel, a peacemaker, a pleaser, if we're trying and doing our best to show up in wholeness, there will definitely be times when you are unskillful. If you come away from family thinking, I was perfect, probably something's wrong. Probably you're not paying attention. This is a theme in a number of the koans, where there's a famous saying of Jogen Sensei. He said in numerous ways, we don't know what kind of character this guy had, but he was brilliant, at least on the wisdom level. And I remember reading one teaching that was very encouraging. He was apologizing to his students. He said, I'm sorry I'm not more skillful. Sometimes I miss the mark. That is, I think, clear awareness. So we are going to be unskillful, right? We don't get to be, Mr. or Mrs. Perfect. But the whole thing is a learning. It's a karmic study. So one of the ways you can take value from spending time with family, even if it's really rocky, even if there's a lot of friction, is especially with your close family, you read your family for patterns that you have. In a way, this is shadow work 101. You say, how am I like that too? Sometimes it seems, oh, such and such is so, they just have this massive thing that's glaring to us. And because of the magnitude, we just think, God, wow, that's a lot of wine. That's a lot of wine. That's a lot of turkey. That's a lot of talking, whatever it is. But the more it catches our attention, the more likely it is that we got a little bit of that too. Or the other way that can happen is we are in reaction to some of the patterns we see in our family, and we've just gone the opposite way, which has its own problems. So we see that Uncle Todd, he does drink a whole lot of wine, and I'm at the party all tight-lipped and kind of judgy about it. That's information too, right? Because generally with karmic patterns, we usually go with them or we reject them. So in the gnarliest family situation, even if you get a D minus, you can make some real value in reflecting afterwards. Like, what happened? What happened? How am I like that too? Or what family patterns run through me? I actually find compassion for myself when I do that. I go, oh yeah, I know that's really struggles. I really struggle with that, and I can see that it's coming through my lineage in this particular way of being. And the last thing I want to mention is, well, it's very difficult to change. And most of us haven't changed very much in this room, even though we've done a lot of practice. What we've cultivated is a little bit of a different relationship to what we are. What we are arises in more awareness. It arises with more kindness. Sometimes there's some space. Right? And we've put a lot of time into this practice, and for whatever weird reason, you're not freaked out by being in a zendo. It's kind of weird that you do this. I mean, culturally speaking, this is very strange. You could be like watching something good right now, right? But you're meditating and listening to someone talk about meditating. So where I'm going with this is, it's precious and fortunate from one perspective that we have interest in this technology, but there's nothing really like out there for people to do anything about their stuff, generally speaking. Think about that. Therapy is really expensive and not fast for most people. People are busy, right? They're just trying to survive. It's not easy to meditate, that's for sure. So this is coming from the place of, if we believe that people can just do something about how they are, we're falling into a kind of subtle judgment. Again, we're trying, and we're getting a C+. So we can value Dharma as a means for us to be with ourselves. It can be quite freeing. Right? But not many people in life have an affinity for this, or they don't have the leisure or the luxury. Right? I used to think, why don't you meditate more? You're a real whatever. You could be meditating. Right? I'm judging them for not meditating, the irony of that. I think I outgrew that one. I think so. Yeah. So maybe the way to summarize that point is, whenever we find ourselves separating, judging, all of those things, to return to the thing that we all recognize as true, is that it's just damn hard to be a person. It's just really hard. And that's true for everyone that's bothering us. That's true for the people we like. It's really hard to do this. Right? At least for me, that has a kind of softening effect. You think about the causes and conditions that led someone to be who they are. Right? Nobody chooses to be unhappy. I don't think so. Nobody chooses to be mean or whatever we perceive them to be. Okay, so that's what I brought back from Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, except for that. Any thoughts about family practice, comments, etc.?
I really loved this talk. I just touched into a little part of this, and you kind of expanded on it, which is this idea that, our internal views of other people, right? It's happening in every direction in a family. This dreaming up who someone is just, I can feel that in my family. And, it hurts. And, some of it's good, but it's the stuff that I don't like, right? That stings. But that realization that, I'm doing that too, right? That it's coming out of me, and when you think of the pattern, you're just like, how does this stop? Like, we all have to hold our breaths at the same time. It breaks your brain. But I just wanted to say thank you. That was a really helpful little pointer about that.
You're welcome. Okay. Thank you.
I was just reminded, I didn't see my father for a number of years. He lived across the country and moved back here, like in that area, 3-4 years ago, and then didn't want to know. But I was really struck by how, I still had this idea of who my father was, and it really took time, really spending time with him to understand how he changed. And I just really appreciated all the work that he did. He's not a meditator or anything, but he doesn't jump up and down and scream anymore. He's made a lot of progress in this just general level of awareness and contemplation. But it took a while for me to see that because I still had all these preconceptions about the way it was like. So it's just so valuable to actually spend time with people.
Because sometimes they do change.
Yeah. And sometimes, just talking on the phone and email or social media doesn't take that every time. So understanding your something.
Yeah, thank you.
Your talk has reminded me of a practice that I haven't had in my mind. So it's good to have it going on with the family. And it's a little, I'm noticing in days around not letting people change and not seeing them as they are. But what's actually helpful for me is to recognize when my dad does the thing that he does, right? That it really only hurts when I want him to be different. But if instead I'm just like, well, of course, because you're Jerry Galley and you do that thing, then it's kind of precious, even if the thing that he does is such, he says really shitty, hurtful comment to someone in the family, but just being like, look at you, Jerry Galley. It just really changes the way I experience it. And that's what relates to my practice. And if I'm attached to something being a certain way, I always an outcome that I want, then I suffer. And I don't have to.
Lovely, yeah.
I'm curious to hear a bit more. You were talking about seeing perfection, and obviously people are perfect. And I love that idea of beauty, and I think that where I have trouble with that idea is when there are things that are really bad or really abusive or really sort of just not, that you're kind of taking care of yourself, that you're doing some sort of, boundary setting or something. I guess I just wondered if you can say more about kind of seeing perfection in a situation when you are, without kind of bypassing, when you are in a situation when it is clearly
I think it's similar to what Sarah Eden was saying. It's perfectly what it is. It's not perfect as far as this is really good. It's perfectly what it is. And to affirm that it's perfectly what it is, and it's perfectly it's exactly what's happening. It's exactly what's happening. That doesn't mean you're not going to have moral revulsion. That moral revulsion is perfectly what's happening. Even the response that one has is not wrong. Yeah, so maybe a way to practice that. Is moral revulsion in the ballpark of kind of it might be a little strong. Okay. Revulsion at someone's unskillfulness or those kind of reactions we have is just to affirm this is exactly what's happening. This is what it is. Those sound a little bit like Buddhist bumper stickers, but they can be really helpful things to practice. Right? This is exactly what it is. Because something is so strong in us that wants to wants what's happening to not be unfolding, which is different than wanting things to be unfolding differently. Yeah. Olivia in TV land.
Thank you so much for this. Been working a lot with my dad in the past couple days, so this is really beautiful thing up. And I'm wondering if I can read a quick passage from Liberation from All Obstructions.
Please.
It's like this section came through today, and it feels just so relevant and really touching. So this is in the center of it, but it says, "In this passing moment, karma ripens and all things come to be. I vow to affirm what is. If there's cost, I choose to pay. If there's need, I choose to give. If there's pain, I choose to feel. If there's sorrow, I choose to grieve. When burning, I choose heat. When calm, I choose peace. When starving, I choose hunger. When happy, I choose joy. Whom I after, I choose me. What I shoulder, I choose to bear. When it's my birth, I choose to live. When it's my death, I choose to die. Where this takes me, I choose to go. Being what is, I respond to what is."
Yeah.
So it's like what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Olivia. Yeah. The next part of that chant is, "This life is as real as a dream. The one who knows it cannot be found." So that's also an important aspect of this, which was not the theme of this talk, but how dreamlike it is. These beings, they pop in and out of existence experientially. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I want to say I do hope you have a fabulous holiday if you celebrate it.
Thank you for listening to the Zen Community of Oregon podcast, and thank you for your practice. New episodes air every week. Please consider making a donation at zendust.org. Your support supports us.